Hello, this is Stephen Hawley Martin. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk with Dr. Laurie Nadel about how we can develop our sixth sense. Dr. Nadel is a psychotherapist and the author of Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power. Let's get started.
Laurie, I understand that your introduction to spirits and the sixth sense sorts of things happened some time ago when you rented a New York apartment that was haunted. What happened?
Well, it's funny. I rented an apartment across the street from the United Nations where I was working as a reporter for their news agency. And the apartment had an alcove where there had been a Murphy bed where previous tenants had slept. And when I put my bed in that alcove because it was the natural spot for a bed, but when I tried to sleep, I kept hearing this old person's voice talking about what it was like to get old and die. Nobody cared. And it was very distressing. It was really upsetting. And the next day or the next night, the same thing happened. So I thought maybe I'd been watching too many movies, but maybe somebody died in that corner or something happened. I moved the bed across the apartment to where the wall was next to the traffic, and it was on the street side of the building, and I slept just fine. So I thought that was really strange. It didn't seem logical. So I moved my bed back to the alcove, thinking, of course, that it was my fault and that I had an overactive imagination, only to find that, every time I moved the bed to the alcove, I would hear the same voice, and it was like energy that was trapped.
Just sort of trapped there, a poltergeist, I guess.
Well, it wasn't making things move around. I mean, it was like a piece, the people in the third world, which is most of the world actually, believe that when something traumatic happens, a piece of our soul or a piece of our energy breaks off. And it turned out that the previous tenant was an old man who had had a psychotic breakdown right in that very corner, which is where his bed had been.
So his shadow or whatever, a piece of him was still there. Was he trying to tell you anything in particular? Or was he just?
He was just very depressed and I think just terrified of dying.
Did you do anything to get rid of him? To clear him out, to send him to the light or whatever?
I didn't know anything about this. I mean, I was more freaked out by the fact that there was a voice that wouldn't go away. At the time, which was the early 70s, there were no, New Age sections in the bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you never spoke about this stuff. I mean, it took me 30 years to come out of the closet because I was always afraid that people in both of my professional fields, psychology and journalism, would ridicule me.
I can understand, yeah. I had a friend over in France. His name was Henri Dimitri, and he had an old castle that he inherited from his father, and it had been run down, hadn't been lived in since before World War II. This was back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And he and his wife decided, he'd made some money, so he decided he was going to fix up this old castle. And he and his wife would hear this clanging, banging noise in the middle of the night, and it kept waking him up. And he finally traced the noise down to a place in the basement, in the cellar of this old place. And since they were renovating it, they had workmen there. They got the workmen to tear out a wall where they thought this might be coming from, and lo and behold, behind the wall was a skeleton.
Oh my God.
And they took the skeleton out. They didn't know where it came from, how long it had been there, but they took it out, they gave it a Christian burial, and that ended the night noises that had been going on. Apparently this person had been bricked up behind this wall, was still alive, and died behind there and didn't know they were dead or something like that until they were taken out of there.
Well, they say that that's what happens, and so my immediate thought, and it was simply from having seen a lot of movies, was that maybe someone had died in that corner. I didn't realize that having a trauma or a breakdown could cause a piece of your soul to get trapped or to break off. Just like dying suddenly very often keeps the spirits of the person who just died traumatically from going into the light because they don't realize that they're dead.
Right, yeah. Well, apparently that's what happened to this guy, but I guess once he was brought out of there. Well, now, you've done some things that this sparked your interest, I suppose, and you tried to find out more about it. And I understand you even went to the Amazon jungle.
That's right.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, I've been to the Amazon. I had been to the Amazon as a reporter. Again, that was in the early 70s, and I didn't really know anything about what shamans do or how they can project their souls outside their physical boundaries. It's a technique they call psychonavigation. And in fact, 1994 or 1993, I was experiencing just a lot of grief over the end of my marriage and another breakup and a series of kind of crises in my life. And as I was driving out east in broad daylight, I saw a man's head in front of the windshield. And it was three-dimensional, and it was just kind of hanging in front of the windshield. He had a red and yellow headband around his forehead.
And this was in the Amazon?
No, this was outside New York City.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that I was, I just thought I was having a breakdown and I was hallucinating.
Right.
And I kept looking to see if other people were looking at the head, and everybody else was just driving along. So I thought, oh, that's great. I must have crossed over to the other side because I'm seeing something that isn't there, except it's there. And then 6 weeks later, I got a magazine assignment to go into the Amazon and to write about pharmaceutical companies working with in traditional medicine men or women, or shamans as they're called. And after a 3-day kind of Indiana Jones hike, over cliffs and through boiling mud and with killer insects, finally got to the end of the trail. And there was the guy attached to the same head that had appeared to me 6 weeks earlier.
Oh, my
and he
goodness.
was a senior shaman for this very remote group of Indians in the Amazon in Ecuador. And when I asked him about it through an interpreter, he said, well, his spirit went out traveling, and his spirit found me, and it was kind of a foreshadowing, I guess, of the fact that I was meant to come and meet him.
So somehow the shaman knew at some level that you were coming, and so he went and greeted you where you were first.
But I didn't know I was coming yet.
And you didn't know you were coming yet.
I had two brains, and one was lost, and the other was out looking for me. I was gone.
I'm speaking with Dr. Laurie Nadel, and she's an award-winning journalist and a psychologist, and her book is Dr. Laurie Nadel's Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power. Well, did you learn anything from the shaman who, as far as how to develop your powers?
Well, I asked if he could open my spiritual vision, and he laughed, and he said, oh, that'll be easy for me. And from that point on, I had seen the human aura from time to time, but when I came back to New York, I was seeing them pretty much all the time, and I can see them when the light is right, under most of the time when the light is right, meaning at dusk or when there's kind of subtle daylight.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell anything from people's auras?
The aura has size, it has texture, it has a pulse or rhythm to it, as well as the color, and you can see, you can tell something about the person's baseline personality. People who have lavender auras tend to be like the Deepak Chopras, they're spiritual leaders. People who have green tend to be strongly motivated by financial independence. People who have a kind of honey color or amber color aura tend to be very inquisitive, like Dan Rather has that amber kind of aura, always asking, needing to understand why, and kind of dig at the truth. So there is a personality model that was developed by one of my teachers, Barbara Brennan, who passed away. She has a book that's still in print called What Color Is Your Aura? And the aura can also tell you whether somebody is sick. I have been able to tell if someone is depressed because the aura, the energy is kind of pulled inside, or whether somebody has anxiety or is agitated, because then, the aura it has little, like, jagged kind of lines of energy, kind of like a comic book character when they're angry, and you see little lines over their head.
I heard a story about, I guess I read a story about Edgar Casey once was in a department store. This would have been back in the 1930s or early 40s, because he died in 1945, and he was, one of those department stores that has lots of floors on it, like a Macy's or whatever, and he was getting ready to get on the elevator, and the elevator door opened, and he looked in, and he saw these people in the elevator didn't have an aura, or it seemed very dark, and of course he could see auras. So he decided not to get on, and when the elevator door closed and the elevator started, it fell to the basement.
Oh my God.
And all the people on the elevator were killed.
Oh, wow.
So I guess it can be very helpful to to be able to see auras. Well, tell me, Laurie, how can we develop our sixth sense? I mean, the shaman helped open you up. How can we open ourselves up?
Well, I think the easiest way is to think of a time when you met someone and you knew right away that you were going to get along, or you couldn't trust them, or a time that you had a hunch and you didn't pay attention to it, because most of us really, we second guess ourselves, we talk ourselves out of paying attention to those hunches, and really go back into that experience and relive it, so that you will know next time it happens that this is your intuition, this is the way that your sixth sense communicates with you, because it really is an internal language, and everybody has a personal signal. And intuition is defined as the spontaneous knowing of something without the conscious use of reasoning, and so you can't make it work, and you can't make it happen. It just it happens in a flash, and if you learn to recognize it, then you can make a decision to act on it or not to act on it, and as you keep track of the times that it worked for you, you'll develop more confidence and will naturally want to pay attention.
So you get to know that feeling, right. I guess.
Get to know it.
I'm speaking with Dr. Laurie Nadel, and her book is Dr. Laurie Nadel's Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power. Well, suppose I want to try to make a decision here, and I'm trying to look into the future, whatever. Isn't there some kind of a way that I can activate it? I have to wait for it to happen?
This is what I teach people, is once you know what your personal signal is, and for some people, they may see a red or a green light, or they may see a particular color, they may hear a little voice on the left side of their head or the right side of their head. If you're a man, it may be a woman's voice. If you're a woman, it may be a man's voice. It's not the same voice that says, "Boy, are you stupid." It usually just says yes, no, up, down, turn around. It tends to be very soft, subtle voice. Or you may get a warm feeling across the chest, or a kind of a tingling in your hands. And once you know what your personal signal is, you can take a couple of moments to just, quiet yourself and ask your sixth sense to communicate with you by giving you that signal, so that you start to build a fiber optic two-way network where you can ask your intuition to give you a signal that you can recognize as, that your sixth sense is giving you a heads up. But it is like learning a language or a musical instrument. You do have to put a little bit of time in to learning those cues, so that you can identify them as soon as they happen, and then you can begin to ask for messages.
I see. Well, what kinds of things how can we benefit from having developed this sixth sense?
I personally think that, and of course I'm a humanist, so I think that the biggest benefit to intuition is being able to understand ourselves and other people, and also to be able to have empathy for other people, to be able to connect or sometimes anticipate what somebody else may be having a problem, or that you're at college and your mom wants you to call, and you pick up the phone and call, and your mom says, "Oh, I was just thinking about you.
Yes.
Guess what? Your tax refund just came today." So learning to kind of trust those cues and act on them right away.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you, Dr. Nadel. And let me say to those watching, if you enjoyed today's show, I suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are plenty more interesting shows there and new ones coming along every few days. Just put my name in the YouTube search slot, Stephen Hawley Martin, that's Stephen with a PH, and it should come up near the top. And thanks for joining me today. Talk to you next time.